Everybody was kung fu fighting. Nah, not really. AJ's on the show, and it's the best I could think of that fits in with some sort of martial arts. So AJ North, you've got to check him out. Actor, MMA, badass, games enthusiast, your friend, my friend, friend to the people, humble, doesn't want to be a fighter. Well, you'll find out more in the show. He's an absolutely awesome guest. And I think one of the main things that I've taken away from the show as a whole is the fact that like dedication, tenacity, like having a purpose and just grinding at that every single day leads to success. And it doesn't matter if you're throwing punches or if you're making phone calls. It doesn't matter what you're trying to achieve. If you are at it every single day and you use failure as success training, then you know you're going to get to your end goal. So please keep your comments coming in for anyone that you want on the show. We really appreciate it, and it really helps getting us out there. Here we go, though. The wonderful, the phenomenal Mr. AJ North. And we are live. Yes, we are live indeed. Welcome back to the Daily Show, my lovely internet friends. Thanks for everything you've been sending through. We're absolutely working through your messages, and we will continue to do until this show is no more. However, let's not talk about the past. Damn it, let's not talk about the future. Let's talk about the present. And right now, I got a little present for you guys. The wonderful, the phenomenal, the man himself, Mr. AJ North.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad, AJ. How you doing, sir?
That was a spectacular intro. Thank you.
Had it all written down. It was all thought of beforehand. Some of that ain't true. So, so AJ, for the people out there who haven't followed you already, tell the kids a little bit about yourself.
Wow. Okay, so I guess where to start? I'm currently an actor, or I am an actor, and I will be an actor forever. I've had a very storied life, as we sort of said off air. I've been studying martial arts since I was about 4 years of age. Wow. That took me into a career in MMA, of which I competed for about 13 years under a different name. Your audience might go off and search me out, so don't be looking for AJ North. He's not there. But if you're a real sleuth, you'll probably find me. Competed in MMA 13 years, was a British champion, retired from that, did a little bit of, let's say in that cross period, was working in the games industry, funding my crazy, adrenaline-fueled lifestyles. Worked my way up the industry to working with some notable businesses, Microsoft, studios like Lionhead, worked for Zynga and etc. So worked with some quite notable businesses, and then in between that, retired as an MMA fighter after a couple of high-profile fights, and then kind of was left with a moment of realization. Yeah, like, okay, I've been chasing this dream, this Cinderella story for a long time. What do I do in my life? And then transitioned into acting after, I'll get more into story later about acting, but effectively had a life epiphany or a butterfly effect moment that led me to being like, wow, I should have been doing acting my whole life. I'm really a performer at heart. And that's what I figured out about myself. Like, even from MMA, I obviously love performing for crowds. That was my theater for 13 years.
Yeah.
And then been acting for around 4 years since, and on varying different productions, which has been pretty cool, a bit of a whirlwind in itself. So
I bet, and a complete change of speed and pace from everything you did be doing before. So let's jump way back. You said you started martial arts at 4. What martial arts did you start?
So much like most people of the post Karate Kid era, I was an 80s child. Yeah. So I have a big love for karate. Like, I think it's more credible now. Things like Cobra Kai and things like, I don't know if you know, things like XMA, which are incredible uses of karate in Japanese forms and stuff.
Absolutely,
and with like things like tricking. But yeah, starting karate, did 3 different styles as a kid, but we moved around a lot. My parents moved around a lot when I was a kid, so I'd get to like purple or brown belt, and then we'd be like, right, we're moving house again. I'm like, start again. So yeah, I had a number of different styles that I did. but did get a black belt in a style called Mugendo.
And is that a style of karate?
Yeah, it's like a freestyle karate. So without getting too much into the semantics and politics, there's kickboxing is a derivative of karate, basically.
Is it really? I literally follow MMA, watch it every weekend. My favorite sport. Don't watch any other sports, and I had no clue that kickboxing came from karate.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you had karate, then you had competition karate, and then it broke off into kickboxing, and you've had like Muay Thai obviously influenced that.
Sure.
Kickboxing kind of takes from karate and taekwondo and other kind of traditional arts, and then kind of become a hybrid art in itself. But you can get black belts in kickboxing, but it doesn't really have like a traditional lineage. It kind of comes from these other arts being amalgamated.
I see.
But Mugendo is a traditional art, but it's freestyle and it kind of borders on kickboxing.
Okay.
Bit confusing. But
well, no, I guess no, because if it, I remember when I did karate as a kid, the thing which ultimately put me off of it is I was living in the middle of London and had long blonde hair. So I was getting, bullied a lot. And I did a couple of belts in karate and was like, wicked, I might be able to defend myself. But unless they came at me specifically with, I had no tools to defend myself whatsoever, and was like, okay, this isn't for me. I'm like an 11-year-old kid or whatever at that time. But I imagine it's very easy for that to then lean towards something like kickboxing if you're not stuck within the regimes of competition fighting, where it's like, go, you've got this many moves and stop, and then move into the next piece. So after getting a black belt in martial arts, is it a case of you've been doing this for so long and the discipline's there that it's like, cool, I'm going to go and try something completely different then and see how that's going? Like, where does the shift from sort of karate specific into a more varied and mixed martial arts background happen?
For me, it was more of so I've never enjoyed fighting. I never considered myself a fighter, and I didn't really enjoy the kind of fight entertainment side of MMA. I would say for most of my career, I was a martial artist who loved competing. And specifically, I love winning, right? Who doesn't? Losing in MMA is pretty tough, or anything. But yeah, no, I was more interested in just in the competition side, in the kind of self-development side of it, and finding your true self, pushing your limits and pushing your potential, right? And then the application, like you said, like finding early on that karate wasn't quite the most applicable back then, because it was very, you could argue like karate when we were young was very much of the McDojo family. Like it was teaching really out of date principles
by not very trained senseis, or like people running the school being like, I've done a little bit of this, I could teach karate.
Geezers. Yeah, martial art geezers. Yeah. So MMA was I'd done a variation of Korean martial art called Choi Kwando, and that kind of had given me a bit of a taste of like a bit more application in technique. And my instructor was an amazing instructor, a guy called Nigel Brophy, who he had a military background, and he sort of helped me. He was like a father figure to me from a very young age. And he sort of taught me like the whole practical application of martial arts. He was like, some of the stuff you're going to learn isn't worth a toffee on the street. And some of it is, some of it does work, but you've got to kind of find out what that is through, life lessons, getting into fights or whatever, but also competition. And then, I was about 16. I think I watched the early UFCs, the no holds barred stuff. And I was a big fan growing up of Bloodsport with Van Damme, the Kumite contest, so
that's a movie.
Yeah. So I wanted to dabble in myself and started training. I actually initially I had some sort of experience in judo, some basic submission moves, but I really didn't have much. I hadn't even started practicing Brazilian jiu-jitsu initially. I just saw those competitions and was like, oh, anyone can get stuck in, like, so.
And I know some martial arts. I'm going to be great at this. Like, I already know one. There's a lot of people going in there with one glove on and just 2 are boxers, right?
Yeah, and in the UK at this point, there was a very basic amateur scene that just kind of kicked up. And my ethos was like, after watching that stuff, I was like, well, because in amateur MMA at that time, there was no headshots allowed. It's kind of evolved a little bit now. It was like a body shot competition with grappling. So you could hit the body, not knock anyone out.
No.
But I still saw an opportunity because I was always very confident in myself and my own ability. So in my head, I thought, well, I don't really know many submissions, but I can kick hard. So if I kick the guy in the body so hard he doesn't want to carry on,
he ain't going to submit me then, is he?
Yeah, if I can break his arm or whatever, like with a kick, it doesn't really matter if he tries to take me down. I'll just and my kind of foolish zealotness, let's call it, it did actually work. Like my very first fight or tournament, sorry, where we had to fight twice in one day. The first guy, I just went hell for leather on my kicks, and then I had a bit of judo and just caught him in like an old school, like Carlos Newton style headlock choke. And 45 seconds later, he tapped out. I just literally crushed his neck. It was just instinct, like being back in the school.
No style, just
yeah. So I did that, and then the second match was like, I think people were like, "Oh, who's this kid? Like, can he grapple? Like, he seems to be focused on like standing up, even though this is clearly the easier way to win is grappling." So the next guy I just took to like literally, again, like picking him apart. I just kicked his legs to pieces, kicked his body to pieces. He was a really resilient guy, but eventually he just kind of, he went for a takedown out of sheer exhaustion, and I just guillotine choked him out of complete instinct, and then won that match. And I was like, okay, so I've won both by submission, but it's
by
complete
submission.
Yeah, like, not even knowing any jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So then basically decided maybe I should learn jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And so, that was the kind of start of my path. Like I did the amateur stuff.
Right.
I was at college at the time still. So I was like 16, 17. And I remember talking to another kid who was training at an MMA club. And in the UK, there was quite a prolific club at the time, a place called the Budokai. And there was a team called Ronin MMA. There's some quite interesting UK characters came out of there. Old school fighters like Ian the Machine Freeman started there. And some other characters and stuff like some of the sort of British greats were training there at the time. And it was a pedigree of fighters. Like I trained with some amazing people. It was a really hard place to learn. Like everyone was just so tough. You never went to training not coming out feeling like you'd been in a car crash. It was just hard training, and it sort of really built my character, my like toughness of character.
Sure.
But MMA back in those days, as I transitioned into it, there was no such thing as like a manager early on. There was like,
I bet.
The attitude was different. It was obviously a lot of influence of the early UFC. So people cared more about great fights than great records. So early on, I kind of ended up becoming a bit of a journeyman. I would say like I'd win a few, lose one or two, but I was always looking for who's the best fighter in my division, and just fight them. Like, and I traveled overseas, did the same thing. And then there's this kind of weird transitional period where suddenly it was like, no, we care about records now. Like that matters. And that was,
but I wasn't focusing on that. Like that's a real problem.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, I had to kind of turn my whole ethos on its head and be like, okay, so now I can't just fight anyone, because if I lose all the time, I'll just become a journeyman. And very
quickly, you're not even going to get any new fights, right? Because people are just going to be like,
well, you will, but you'll just be thrown in the lions den all the time against, good fighters.